Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining in the other series of GST in sequel to the first GST introductory video that was introduced. Now this is all about section 2. And if you're watching the video for the first time, do like, comment, share and subscribe. There won't be any specific topics in this channel, but it will revolve around financial planning, some important laws that you need to know if you are doing a CA, if you are pursuing CA, CS or CMA. Now, it will not take much of your time here. It will be a short and a quick video. The section 2 of CGST Act 2017, and you can definitely go ahead and take screenshot from the YouTube video to make sure that you have these sort of notes when you're going through for a quick revision. Now these definitions are used and turned into in such a simplified way to make it better and beneficial for yourself. Now, the definition of various expression in GST, IGST, UGST Act and SGST Act have been used. The video that you're watching in. I'll just, as these are not exactly definition, that is simplified version of definition. So the first one we have to start off with the aggregate turnover. To the left side, there says when you are calculating, it will include all the taxable supply, exempted supply, export of goods or service or both, interstate supplies of a person having same PAN, zero rated supply, non-taxable supply, value of outward supply on which tax is payable by, reverse charge basis. But it includes, I'm looking to the right side, that is activities and transaction in Schedule 3, value of inward supply on which tax is payable by a person on a reverse charge basis, CGST, SGST, UGST, IGST and cess. So when you do your plus and minus, this is the time you find your aggregate turnover. The next on the board we have is business. Now this definition is inclusive. Any kind of trade, commerce, manufacture, professional, vocation, etc. Any incidental or ancillary activities, whether or not there is a volume, frequency, continuity or regularity, whether or not for pecuniary benefit. Supply or acquisition of goods including capital goods or service in connection with the commencement of closure of business, still considered to be a business. Provision of facility to member of a club or association, any sort of admission to any premises, services supplied by a person as the holder of an office, services by a race club to and a bookmaker of race club, and any activities by central, state or any local authority is considered to be business. Speaking about business vertical. Now, business vertical is basically a concept that has been deleted by CGST Amendment Act. Now, what exactly it is it was, as in the term, it is engaged in the supply of individual or good and services or a group related of goods or services which is subject to a different risk and returns. Now, what it has to do with GST is basically earlier the GST allowed multiple registration in the same state having a same PAN of the different business vertical. Now, instead of the concept of business vertical, it is simply saying you can have a registration for multiple business premises now, instead of going into the complexity or technicality of the business vertical. Speaking about capital goods, as per GST, now any goods gets capitalized in the books of account of a taxable person who claims ITC. Now, these goods are to be used or intended to be used in the course of furtherance of business, considered to be capital goods. Speaking about casual taxable person, any person who occasionally undertakes a transaction in a state or union territory where he has no fixed place of business. For example, a person in Haryana participating in a trade fair in Delhi is a casual taxable person, requires registration in Delhi for the purpose of GST. Composite supply. Taxable person supply to agree to supply services or goods to the recipient, in which there comprises of two or more goods or services or both, which are being naturally bundled, one of which is a principal supply in the ordinary course of business, is considered to be a composite supply. Best example you can see and relate for yourself is hotel services. Now, understanding what is consideration. Now, consideration can be delivered by any person, by the recipient or any other person for the purpose of goods or services. Now, the payment made or to be made in the money or otherwise, and not amount that the recipient paid, but the amount that supplier collect, whether from the recipient or third party, still it's a consideration. Any kind of act or forbearance, voluntary in respect of response, or inducement of supply of goods and services, whether by the recipient or any other person, still a consideration, but does not include any government subsidy or deposit for the purpose of consideration. But it will form as a part of consideration only if the deposit, whether refundable or not, given in respect of supply of goods or service, unless supplier applies the deposit as a consideration for the supply. That takes me to the next definition here that we are looking at for continuous supply of goods. Now, do not confuse yourself, as there are continuous supply of services and also continuous supply of goods. Similar yet different. Now, for the purpose of goods, supply of goods which is provided or agreed to be provided continuously or on a recurring basis under a contract, whether or not by the means of cable, pipeline or wire or other conduit, and for which supplier invoices the recipient on a regular basis, right, or periodic basis, and includes supply of such good at government may specify time to time is a continuous supply of goods. Speaking about continuous supply of services. Now, a supply of service means which is provided or agreed to be provided continuously or recurrent basis under a contract for a period exceeding 3 months with periodic payment and includes supply of service as government may specify time to time. For example, annual maintenance contracts, I mean company के सौ system के लिए they have issued a contract to IT support based firm, or annual the licensing of software brand names, renting immovable property. These are the continuous supply of service. The next we have is what is known as e-commerce. Trending and interesting. Supply of goods and service or both, including digital product over digital or electronic network. Any kind of physical store or outlet that supply goods or service or both within the help of a digital network which is facilitated by a third party will fall under the scope of its definition. Even if a telephone network call center using the fancy and easy number can also constitute a digital network. Now, electronic commerce is not to be understood as the activity of operator of the digital network alone. Together, it is electronic commerce. Now, understand what is an electronic commerce operator. Now, electronic commerce operator is a person who owns, operate, manages digital or electronic facility or platform or for electronic commerce is a electronic commerce operator. Where while you can talk about an aggregator like Ola, Swiggy, etc., it connects the customer with the supplier and service provider. An e-commerce operator, Flipkart, facilitate the entire process of supply of goods on services. Now, under the GST law, even if the aggregator would be covered under the definition of electronic commerce operator. All right. To the next that we have is exempt supply. Now, exempt supply means supply of any goods or service or both which attract nil rate of tax or which may be wholly exempted from a tax under section 11 or under section 6 of Integrated Goods and Service Act and includes non-taxable supply. Now, basically it has a very broad meaning. It includes non-taxable supplies, such as supplies are included in the aggregate turnover for determining whether registration is required under 22 subsection 1 of the CGST Act 2017, which we'll get into the detail, right, in the coming videos. Speaking about what is fixed establishment. Now, fixed establishment is having something that is having a sufficient degree of permanence, having a structure of human and technical resources other than a registered place of business to receive and use services for its own needs is a fixed establishment. Basically, these are tests that has been given in the definition to go ahead and consider this as a establishment as a fixed establishment. But not every temporary or interim location of a project site or transit warehouse will become a fixed establishment of a taxable person. The temporary presence of staff in a place by the way of a short visit to a place or so does not make the place as a fixed establishment. To the next, what we have here is what is known as goods as per GST. Anything other than securities, money, every kind of movable property other than security, money, right? But it includes any sort of actionable claims, growing crops, grass and things attached to the land, forming part of the land, which are agreed to be served before the supply under a contract of supply. In the terms of actionable claim, it does not include other than lottery, betting, gambling will not treat it as a supply of goods or supply of the virtue for schedule 3. वो तो हम consider ही नहीं करेंगे. Now, intangible supplies like DEPB license, copyright and carbon credit would include to be covered under as a part of goods for the purpose of this definition. Let's understand what is input service distributor. Now, input service distributor is an office of the supplier which receive tax invoices towards the receipt of input service, issues a prescribed document for the purpose of distributing the credit of input tax to a supplier having same PAN. Now, there is no restriction by the law that the IGS input service distributor must be the head office. Further, the law also places no limit on number of the offices that can be registered as input service distributor. Therefore, a single company may choose to have multiple regional office as input service distributor based on its business requirement. Now, next we have here is job worker. Now, for job worker, there are bits that we need to attach. It means first we need to understand job work. So job work means any treatment or process undertaken by a person on goods belonging to someone else, other registered person, and expression of job worker shall be constructed accordingly. Okay. A job worker is free to, while treatment and processing are commonly understood as services. So there is no implication that the job worker is purely service or that goods will not be used for such treatment or processing. Then the law makes no instance that the job worker must be a registered person. It can be an unregistered person is doing a job on someone else's behalf. Let's say I have a brand for shoe. I send goods to the raw material to a person sitting in Agra doing the processing and treatment is job work, but it's merely not considered as to be service. And such job work may be registered, may not be registered. The next we have on the board is location of recipient of services. Now, there are 4 instances. The first instance where the supply is received at a place of business. Okay, where the supply is received at the place of business, registered place of the business shall be the location of the recipient of the service. Now, where the supply is received other than the registered place of business, a fixed establishment or elsewhere, then the location of such fixed establishment. Now, where the supply is received at more than one establishment, whether the registered place of business or fixed establishment, then the location of establishment more directly concerned with the recipient of the supply shall be considered to be the location of the recipient of services. Now, in the absence of such places, his home address, the resident address shall be considered as the location for the recipient for the services. What will be considered as a location for the supplier of the service? That is the other definition. Now, if the supply is made from the business location, which has for which registration has been obtained, it's a very clear-cut case. Same place from where the supply has been made. Where the supply is made from other than the place of business, for which registration has been obtained, a fixed establishment elsewhere, then again the fixed establishment. Now, where the supply is made for more than one establishment, whether the place of business or fixed establishment, in that case, something which is more directly concerned with the provision of supply. In absence of such places, the residential of the supplier. Speaking about market value as per GST. First is, it says the full amount which a recipient of supply is required to pay in order to obtain the goods or service, or both for like kind or quality, or at about same time and the same commercial level, where the recipient and the supplier are not related. Related nahi hone chahiye and you're good to go. That is market value. Now, the terms find reference only in the provision in relation to confiscation of goods. When this term will be used, when the goods are being confiscated or conveyance arising on accounts of contravention of the provision of the law. Say, supply is made by a taxable person who has failed to obtain registration. Then the law will provide the owner of the goods to be given an option to pay fine not exceeding the market value of the goods in question, to safeguard his good or conveyance from being confiscated. Right? Speaking about mixed supply. Now, something which is not naturally bundled is as simple as mixed supply, right? Two or more individual supply or goods or services, or any combination there, made in conjunction with each other by a taxable person for a single price, where such supply does not constitute a composite supply, is mixed supply. Right? When two or more supply that have individual identity and can be supplied separately but are deliberately supplied in consolidated price without any indication of separate price for individual supply is mixed supply. And each of the supply that are intended to be acquired by the recipient is mixed supply. The method of billing separately for unrelated supply or together could be examined when the rates are differentiating. Differing, whatever the case. Speaking about the next definition is outward supply, right? So for outward supply in relation to a person, for mixed supply you can also consider an example over here. A supply of package consisting canned food, dry fruits, chocolate, sweets supplied for a single price. This is a supply will consider as a mixed supply. It can be sold individually, right? The way you have those gift hamper during the festive occasion, right? In a single basket. That is all about mixed supply. Speaking about outward supply, in relation to a person shall mean a supply of goods or services, whether by sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease, or disposal, or any other means made or agreed to be made by such person in course of furtherance of business, is outward supply. Even in case agreed to supply will also consider as outward supply. It is important to note that GST will be imposed on advance payment only towards service made under agreements for supply in future. Something that you want to supply in future will consider to be an outward supply, but you have to make the payment of GST in advance. Next we have in picture is place of business. A place of business includes a place from where the business is ordinarily carried on and includes a warehouse, godown, or any other place where taxable person store his goods, provides, receive goods or services. A place where taxable person maintain his books of accounts. A place where taxable person is engaged in business through an agent or whatever name called is considered to be a place of business. For example, a builder has his register corporate office in Delhi and construction site in Noida. In this case, the place of business is Delhi and is where the business is already being carried on, where the business decision being made. The construction lacks sufficient degree of permanence. Okay. Moving on to which we have the next definition as recipient. Now, recipient is who? Where a consideration is payable for the supply of goods and services. The person who is paying that consideration is a recipient. Where no consideration is payable for supply of goods, the person to whom the goods are being delivered or to whom possession of the goods or services is being made available to is a recipient, right? Where no consideration is payable for the supply of service, the person to whom service is being rendered. Any reference to a person whom supply is made shall be considered as the reference to the recipient for the supply as per GST. Now, what is reverse charge? Now, reverse charge is the liability to pay tax by the recipient of the supply of goods or service, or both, instead of the supplier of such goods and services, or both, under section 9 subsection 3 or 9 subsection 4, or under 5 subsection 3 or 5(4) of the IGST Act. In this case, this is the general procedure that we follow. The supplier of the goods and service provides supply of goods and services to the receiver, and then the supplier of goods and services pays tax towards the account of the government. This is the general mechanism. In reverse charge mechanism, the supplier of goods and service supply the goods and services to the receiver. Receiver pays price of goods and services. However, instead of paying taxes, he credits the account of the government with the GST instead of supplier of goods and services doing it. Now, this GST The scope of reverse charge is expanded to include goods in addition to the service and service in addition to the goods that may be notified even if the supplier is registered. And for the terms of service, for the taxation of reverse charge basis where the supplier is unregistered and the recipient is registered. Still, there can be further amendments from time to time. Speaking about what is service under goods and service tax. Very simple, anything other than goods. Includes transaction in money but does not include money and securities. Activities relating to the use of money or its conversion by cash or any other mode from one form to the other, currency or denomination to another form, currency or denomination for which consideration is charged. Right. It includes as a part of service. Now, service which has been defined in a residual manner due to which the definition is too wide. So, and simple as that, anything other than goods is your service. Speaking about turnover. Now, turnover simply means all taxable supplies, exempt supplies, export of goods or service made within a state by a taxable person. Right. So this is turnover in state. It excludes any kind of CGST, SGST, UGST and IGST. All interstate supply of goods and service or service made from the state by the said taxable person. The total value of such will be a turnover in state. The expression of turnover in state or union territory is basically a replica of expression aggregate turnover, but for a fact the turnover in state is restricted to the turnover of taxable person in that particular state and opposed to aggregate turnover of all taxable person having the same PAN on all India basis. So it has to just to do with the state, not as a supply done as a whole of a person having the same PAN. Now, turnover of state is used in following context of GST law is basically for the payment of tax in the composition scheme and distribution of input tax credited by an input service distributor. The next we have to deal with is voucher. It's the second last definition. It's as simple as that, the way we understand it. Any instrument where there is an obligation to accept it as a consideration or a part of consideration for a supply of goods or service or both, and where the goods or service or both to be supplied or the identities of the potential supplier are either indicated on the instrument itself or in related documentation, including the terms and condition of use of such instrument. So basically, a voucher is an asset for the recipient. Without a recipient, voucher is nothing. It loses its meaning. It is an instrument that can be used instead of money, which can be used for effecting yet another inward supply, like for example coupons, tokens, promo codes, etc. Speaking about the fact, we are to the works contract, the last definition of this presentation altogether, and let's just do it. So a contract wherein transfer of property in goods is involved in execution of such contract, right? It includes contract for building, construction, fabrication, completion, erection, civil works basically, installation, fitting outs, improvement, modification, repair, maintenance, renovation, alteration, commission of any immovable property, seeing it as a broad. Now it is the work contracts is limited to the contracts to do with only immovable property, unlike erstwhile the definition of the terms given in service tax law, which used to extend it to the movable property. It's not in the case of GST. And further, as part 2 of the CGST Act, the work contract is regarded as a supply of service. Right? So that is everything that you need to know in the terms of the important definition for GST. Wait for the next video to be uploaded, and soon we are going to reveal what it's going to be exactly all about. There are going to be at least 20 to 23 videos which will cover the entire GST for you all in this channel, to make sure you are able to take the advantage of it. Share, like, comment and subscribe, and thank you for watching today. And for the notes, you can take the screenshots. It's well visible. You can make the most of it. Thank you.